So I'll tell you off the bat, when I started working for the Conservation Foundation, I am a marketing MBA. I'm a salesman, and I went to work for a conservation organization and just realized that a lot of us conservationists don't know how to sell our product. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is I think you're the choir, and the message can't just stay with the choir. Somebody told me once before that, well, you need to preach to the choir because the choir is the only one that sings. And we need that to keep going. So that's going to be the underlying message is there's 50 people here tonight, but how do we get this to be 500 people doing what you're doing and make this where it's the average thing that's happening instead of you're the exception. Our main office is in Naperville, 60 acres permanently protected with a conservation easement. We put as many of these green infrastructure sites or things onto our property, the solar panels, wind turbines, green roof, multiple different types of rainwater collection, meadow planting, woodland restoration, you name it. If we could think of it, we put it there. On a farm that dates back to the 1870s. So even though there's a lot of old historic, we put all this new green infrastructure there, and we bring as many people there as we can to show off how pretty and these concepts that I'm going to be talking about are not odd things that are going to make you look weird in your neighborhood. And part of why we're doing these things is that it's still, you look at in the state of Illinois, 95% private property. So if we're going to really make the community nice, if we're going to make our town nice, the county nice, we have to work with everybody. And that means connecting with people. The picture on the left, no one in my family seems to know where that picture was taken. And so I said, well, then I'm just going to tell people that I'm just with my sister. So what's the big deal? But, in this book by Kellert, I guided my son to his first big muskie, or I'm hiking on the Appalachian Trail. We have to understand, and you as birders do, that being outside is where we came from. And to be healthy and happy, we need to be out more. And my daughter's here dancing in the Mediterranean, my son and his best friend. We're drawn to nature, and it's the common thing for us to want to be outside and gardening and bird watching. And that's what I'm trying to bring out with my Conservation at Home program is bring something solid to people and give them a reason to want to improve things environmentally. So like this couple, I walked their property with them and they said, well, what is this? And I said, that's actually buckthorn. And what's this one? And I said, that's Asian honeysuckle. And they said, 90% of our forest is bad stuff. And I said, yeah, that's probably about right. Well, a year later, they called me and they said, we're done. And I said, what do you mean you're done? And she said, my husband bought a weed whip with a blade on it and a light with a helmet. And he was out there until I had to call him in for dinner, and it was cleared. And underneath, you can't see it here, but there's Jack in the Pulpit popping up, and bloodroot and trillium and all these things that they didn't have. And I said, this is perfect. They got their sign, and I said, you need a bluebird house. And she said, Jim, we've been here for 17 years. We've never had a bluebird. And I said, well, you never had a savanna before. You had this got off a wood or woods that was so thick with buckthorn. And just as I said that, you should have a bluebird house, in comes this bluebird, and it flies right next to us over onto the horse fence and sits there and preens itself right in front of us. And she said, did you have that in your car? So bringing the information to people that it works and we can do this. And I bring simple things to people. Okay, dealing with the water on your property, making food and nesting water available to the critters that come to our house, less turf grass, healthy soil, more oak trees. And because it's a simple thing that I'm asking them, I don't get as much negative feedback. And that's what I'm going to ask you is if, you know, I think everybody here, you understand it. You've seen the Doug Tallamy story. You've read the books. You understand it. But tell me about your neighbor, the guy across the street, down the block, your homeowners association, what goes on around the pond. So how do we get that to be mainstream? So I bring to people that there's some benefit for us. We're animals. We're drawn to nature. We get all of our medicine from plants, and we live, drink, breathe water, and we're made up of water. So it just makes sense that we want to be this way. And in this book by Bromfeld, there's a war being waged on our natural resources. And I don't think anybody's going to argue about that. And you look at things like, I teach at COD, and there's a direct correlation between density of humans and degradation of the atmosphere and the water, everything in the environment. So the worst river we have in Illinois is the Chicago River, and also the most densely populated area. And the best creeks we have are out in Lake County, out beyond Rockford, out by Galena or Southern Illinois, where the density of people is less. So, and bring it back to that beginning point that if you like the birds, if, whatever you like in this environment that we live in, it all is based on plants. That plants are the basic thing that brings life to this planet. So when we're thinking of how we could change things, it's going to always go back to the plants. The plants support the insects support the birds, and so on. And I use this picture with the hummingbird. Any bird can quickly scan the property, whether it be a park district or municipal site, whatever it is, and there's either something there for the bird and he goes, oh, look at that, or they're not. So we have determined in our landscape what is hospitable to the critters. And if you have nothing good for them, don't be surprised if you don't have many. So this is the prairie state, and I talk to people about, if you lived in Arizona, we'd be talking about cactus. And if you lived in California, we'd be talking about the chaparral climate. Here we're talking about a prairie. And these deep-rooted plants that can sustain through the winter, the sleet, the hail, the wind, all of these things. So using a base of these plants from the Illinois region are what's going to be most sustainable and most attractive to wildlife. And they can be very pretty. So bringing that benefit to people, why should I make these changes? Because it's better for you, and it's going to be pretty, and it's going to attract wildlife at the same time. So I show a lot of pictures. I'll run through them here of other projects we've worked on and things that we've done. The extra step that we take is we go to the site and we walk it and we help identify things, and we give them plant suggestions to replace the things that are existing there. And some of these yards, all the way up would be no grass in the front yard. And this is one in Glen Ellen. And not that you're going to do this, but some people are going this far and they love it. So whatever point that you take, moving in this direction is going to be a positive thing for the environment. We've got projects all over the area. We now have 8 different organizations running the Conservation at Home and Conservation at Work program throughout the Chicagoland area, all the way through Lake County into Wisconsin now, all the way out to Rockford, and all the way down to St. Louis. So wherever the people are located, it wouldn't matter what county you're in, we're going to be able to cover you. And we work with park district, municipal sites. These are just a handful of the 120 or so corporate sites and hospitals, college campuses, you name it, that we've worked with on converting typical landscape grass to a conservation style landscape. And another thing I bring is, say people are into vegetable gardening. I work with the master gardeners and they want to grow tomatoes. Well, understanding that this Monarda here is going to draw the attractant, the pollinators for this pear tree. And this milkweed is going to bring pollinators that are going to pollinate the peppers and the other plants in the area. So integrating these into garden settings will both help beauty, because you're getting flowers in with your vegetables, and also increase the productivity of the vegetables themselves. This was a park site I worked on, and a mink came across this creek just as we were walking. Now, many of the parks, you know, our generation typically are not playing as much softball and soccer anymore. We're pushing our grandkids or walking with our children and using the paths, passive recreation. So improving the park areas and the forest preserve areas for this passive recreation and habitat building. We're taking areas like this. This was in Naperville, where this was a ditch that was just mud, and it was never going to be a soccer field, and it was just a difficult place to mow. And we creating this ditch is now a bioswale. So renaming a rain garden or a bioswale from an area that was something like a ditch, creating habitat. Now there's a place for birds and rabbits, and the whole ecosystem can function in a small area here. And we have an opportunity to see improvement. My granddaughter, downtown Chicago, they were strolling along, and my son noticed that the random milkweed had grown up in the crack of this planting. And sure enough, on this milkweed was a monarch caterpillar. And even my daughter-in-law was not too sold on the concept, but then she started thinking and asking me questions like, how in the world would a monarch flying along, looking at the Sears Tower or something, say, oh, I should fly down here and lay an egg? You know, how does this all work? And the magic, I ended up giving them some caterpillars, and they watched as they pupated, and my granddaughter had names for them. One of them was Banana and one was Coco. And she's asking Mom, well, how come Coco's hanging in a J from the top and it's not moving? I think it's dead. And when it, you know, changes, that doesn't look like Coco. It's orange now. The magic rubbed off on the daughter-in-law and my son, who understood the whole concept, but again, watching it and hearing it through the eyes of his daughter was an amazing experience for them. And I bring to people stuff like, you know, the common milkweed that you see is not the only milkweed. We can utilize these butterfly milkweed, for example, beautiful short milkweed that can be grown anywhere and replace some of the common things in our yards. So solving problems. What do people want? They have problems with water. Their soil is bad. They don't have enough birds or butterflies. So understanding that some of these things are going to help you in your yard, in your journey, and you're going to get some benefit from it. I went to one yard and they said, you have to come back here and see where the water puddles. We have a lake here every summer. And this was the area. And I said, well, it doesn't look like a lake to me. But the vast differences changing, and this is poor compacted clay. So it can vary from under 2 inches of water to bone dry and cracked soil. And what kind of plant could withstand that differences? Grass was never meant to grow in this kind of harsh environment. And it's cracked clay. Most of the areas we've scraped off the topsoil and they sold it. And educating people about using the leaves and composting and improving the soil so that things can flourish better in a adapted environment like that in a subdivision. So here's your birds. 50% of the bird count falls into this category of the top right and bottom left are invasive. And we've got problems with even our native birds being out of control because we've changed the environment. What people want are the grouping of birds here, for example. Look at the color variations. And yes, we can attract these. We promote bird feeders, but understanding that this is not the long-term diet. This is coming for a snack so that we can enjoy the birds up close and maybe helping them a little bit through tough winter months, but that's not, they need to have that consistent food source for their young. And in the spring, they're feeding their birds. The birds are all feeding their young insects, and the long-term to see these birds and to really have them flourish is going to be providing adequate habitat. There's a whole nother grouping of birds that are not going to come to a feeder. And if they do, like the oriole may come to a feeder if you put some grape jelly or something that's not a sustainable food source for them either. But if we want to attract these things, understanding that the habitat is the main thing. How do we get this across? And people want these birds. Cedar waxwing, for example, if you plant a serviceberry or a viburnum, you've increased your chances tenfold of seeing a cedar waxwing in your yard. So it can be a simple thing to change to make, but these are the things like, would your neighbor and the people around, would they be willing to make changes? Growing things that we know are going to attract birds and provide habitat for a variety of different creatures. Nobody calls me and said, how do I get more snakes in my yard? Or how do I get more skunks to come over? So I think the whole, even with the Audubon, the draw is on birds and on butterflies. Those are the two things that people love. And there's diversity and there's color and there's fascination with these creatures, very much so not the way with things like a possum or a coyote or some of the other creatures that we have in our area that, again, are very important. But we're taking the two, I think birds and butterflies are the simple ones to use for to bring the masses along, to say, come on, we all have to do this together. And nothing more than a butterfly. Very few people will tell me they hate butterflies. I've had a few people say birds creep me out, and they go back to that the Alfred Hitchcock Birds movie or something like that. And like, come on, that was what, 40 years ago. Let it go. But with these other creatures that I can use to try to attract people and connect with them over the story, and understanding that it's simple. They just want food and shelter and a place to hang out. So, the connection people have with milkweed, with monarchs, I get that. This is not even all that the monarch needs. They need nectar throughout the season, and they're migrating and so on. So we have to think a little bigger than just plant a milkweed. So we worked on projects. This is one in Naperville where this is the site we looked at, and they said, can't we do something better here? And we did. And we purposely made a pathway that was inviting so people would walk in. There's a bench further back and a variety of blooming and grasses that would attract birds and butterflies to this site right in an urban area of Naperville. And people love it now. So when you have these wins, you can show people projects you've done. We did one at the Children's Museum, a number of places, and then show them how would you do it in a residential setting. So these people called and they said, we've got a huge problem with water coming out of the downspout and it pours down on the sidewalk. In the summer, we have wet shoes coming into the house. In the wintertime, it turns into ice. We have to put down salt. Salt kills the grass. We don't have birds. We don't have butterflies. So how would you implement something on an urban site like this? And first thing we did was, it isn't rocket science that water is going to go down onto the sidewalk if the sidewalk is lower than the landscape. So we lowered the sidewalk, or leave the sidewalk alone, lower the area over here, and drain the water to an area where we can have a little rain garden and take some of the sod out in the front, get rid of those big arborvitae that were blocking all the pretty brickwork, and less mowing. A defined edge is one of the things I've learned that makes it look attractive, because it's formal. In the front yard, you don't want this wild prairie. And having these plants put in, not seeding, but clumped plants that look organized. And they're now getting, the water problem is solved. They now have, this is milkweed. They can have birds and butterflies coming to their property again, and it's a win-win. So all you have to do is Google something. If you want to know your lilac, is that native, just Google it, and you'll find out that a high percentage of the things that we have in our yards are not from here. And so it's not that they're bad, but in the house, they would be what I call a tchotchke. So you wouldn't have, if you came inside the house, you have the microwave, you have your couch, your TV, your functional things, your stove, refrigerator, and you base things, that's first. Get my table and chairs and the functional things. Then you decorate around it with a candle and pictures on the wall, so on. We haven't done that with the landscape. We aren't using the native stuff as the base, the functional part, and then we can decorate with a lilac that reminds me of my grandma or something. We cover most of our area in turf. I'll talk about that. And a lot of these plants from all over the world that we brought here. And if you love, roses, say you love roses and they just think they're the greatest thing ever, great. But understand that they're not going to feed that cedar waxwing, and they're not connected to the environment. They're not part of native Illinois. So you can have them for decorative, viewing. Even things like your vegetables, you have them there for function. You're going to get food from them. But looking at something, hosta or daylily, is it providing enough function for that space? That's your question. We've covered the area with grass, and certain birds have benefited. Geese love grass. They can see the coyotes coming, and they walk, they're fat and they're lazy. They want to walk in and out of the water. And we've made these areas for them. We have erosion and other problems with these areas. I don't want to put a blanket down here for my family. It's going to be covered in goose poop, and because there's no dandelions, it's probably chemically laden with herbicides. And we attract a monoculture of geese on this grass, and a number of other problems with turf next to waterways. Instead, I try to sell the concept of a naturalized shoreline. And, these homeowners here have to buy into the fact that there's no geese here, and that instead of having just geese, you're going to have a heron and an egret and hawks coming down to eat the rabbits that are in here, or a diversity of plant material will create a diversity of insects and toads and all the things that can live in a varied habitat. We're covering our county in turf. I used to sell fertilizer. Nitrogen is not a good thing for grass in high doses like this, way out of balance. Your grass doesn't want it. It washes off into the lakes and rivers. And we're covering the United States in turf. It never was this way when the first settlers came. And the only states that we haven't covered in turf are either mountainous, desert, or sparsely populated areas where human activity has not got to the point that we've overrun the typical landscape. So turf grass has zero wildlife benefit. and we've covered 20 million acres. We spend $40 billion on grass care, and even an average household, $500 on a yard care. And it's not supporting wildlife. So we might want some grass, but I think we could talk people into a little less and work at it that way. So if I showed you a picture, left or right, which one's prettier? Which one's supporting wildlife? Which one is blooming in the middle of a drought? Which one has to be mowed every week? Which one is brown now during this drought? And which one's, pretty and blooming? What side are you most likely to see a finch eating seeds or a monarch laying eggs? That orange is all milkweed along the front. Very purposefully planted. It's not this crazy wild prairie, because this is in a more urban setting, but we can do this. And I think very few people are going to argue with me that, oh no, I like this side better. We created a product to try to get away from the prairie, and the idea of a pollinator meadow. It's a shorter version of a prairie. So it's a short grass prairie, maybe more heavily forbed. The flowers are more. And this is the meadow we have at the McDonald farm in Naperville. Ours is 25 feet wide and 1,400 lineal feet along a regional bike path. Don't have to mow it. We mow it maybe once a month or once a year rather than once a week. And we sold it to the Toll Road Authority. So this is the front slope. I don't want it. It's full of salt and broken car parts, but the back slopes are being naturalized. This is penstemon that the hummingbirds love in early spring. And you can still see a deer coming towards the road, or there's enough room here for another critter that might come out to give you some view. So this is also approximately 50% less costly for the toll road or IDOT to incorporate into the landscape, and much better for the trees that are planted. And if we save money on the toll road, then they don't have to raise the tolls. It's a win-win situation to reduce maintenance. I do a lot of information about trees. I know you've had other things about them, but again, bringing people information that it's not just a tree. Al Gore was the one that said, plant a tree, save the world. Well, it's not that easy. It's not just plant a tree. Like in the story I had, down in this category 3, we have huge problems with invasive trees. In this category 2 here, honey locust, overplanted, maple overplanted, box elders are weedy native trees. The ash we've had problems with, obviously, with the ash borer. Bradford pear is going to be an invasive species on the species list very soon of the calorie pear varieties. And just like the elm that have all been died off, we overplanted those. We didn't learn. We overplanted ash. Now the next one on the list is going to be the honey locust or maple that we're going to have a problem with. There is a longhorn beetle that is looming that will eat maple. So diversifying the tree species would be a great thing for us to be working on. And having people understand that grass is not meant to be, if you love this tree, the best thing you could do is get this grass away from the tree. Those leaves that fall, we can't have them on our precious grass, so we have to bag them and bring them to the curb. And that is the food source and the soil reparation that the tree is dropping for itself, that we can't leave it lay there because of the way we've treated our lawns. So I talk to people about, if this tree is precious to you, then let's do something to make it last as long as it should last. Instead, we're having a problem with especially oaks that are not going the 200, 300 years that they can go. They're declining at a younger age because of stress factors on how we're driving over the root systems or turf on them. And they are more subjective to wind damage and insect damage when they're not strong. bringing that information to people and show them that in these woodland areas, if we get the grass out of there, look at the beautiful things, the woodland phlox, the wild geranium, the sedges, the bluebells. There are beautiful alternatives for any of these areas. And understanding the difference between pervious and impervious surfaces and how we can start utilizing water. It's going to rain across the areas next couple of days, and we're going to carry a lot of material back into our waterways from that. There's a whole grouping of animals and birds that live off of clean water, and almost all of our waterways are impaired one way or another, and one of the biggest impairments is nutrient load. So in a backyard situation, they want to have a place for little Johnny to play and play soccer. They've probably herbicided this grass, but they've done a buffer on the outside. So the yards are all slanted. There's probably a drain head over here, but before it can do that, the water can be absorbed. It can be cleansed, and you have this backdrop of pretty plants out here. You're going to attract more birds and butterflies. So how do we integrate into our neighborhoods these plants that are going to be functional and solve problems? So rain barrels, rain gardens, these are all simple things that we can integrate. And we've sold 14,000 rain barrels now as a step to say there's a better way. Working with municipalities on rain gardens along the roadways, bioswales. Some of the communities are promoting this heavily. So, if you have connection with your municipality, those are things that can be integrated on a green infrastructure type way. And simple things like people understand that this drains to our lake or river, but the connectivity of planting plants in a self-watering condition, whereas this water is coming down to get into this drain we've created, that we can absorb that water and keep it out of the drain head longer. Almost all the municipalities I'm working with have issues with flooding, and they want to reduce the amount of water that gets poured in this during a flood event. So what I'm trying to accomplish in the communities is also something that will help everybody along the way. The other side of that pipe is the ugly part that we don't want to think about. I have a lot of people tell me that, well, I don't live anywhere near the river, so it's not me that's doing it. And the real answer is we're all connected. All of our driveways go down to the street. All the streets are connected. So every little bit we can do, it would be appreciated. This picture is my boss and I taking the downspouts and putting a rubber mat and aiming it to a reduced area here. Notice the air conditioner we're going to cover up in this next view. We want to get the water away from the sidewalk and the foundation and get it to where we can utilize plants to absorb it. The air conditioner unit's back here behind this viburnum, and we don't have to mow it. Interesting thing, like this is a rattlesnake master. It's the native yucca, and it just popped up in this dry area that's not in the bottom of this pit. Don't know where that seed came from, but it wasn't part of the planting plan here. But that's part of the story we tell people, that sometimes our plan is not God's plan and things happen. But this is what I'm trying to accomplish with the Conservation at Home program, and make it somewhat simple. So it has to go beyond, if this presentation tonight reaches the 50 people here and that's it, I'm sure I haven't told you a whole lot of new information tonight. But the point is, I'm trying to give you the information that you could sell to your neighbor, to your spouse, or to your boss, or to somebody at the church, the library. Where can we expand the good landscaping that we know we need? This is the information. Now, I don't work in Lake County directly, so I wouldn't be the one coming to your yard or helping you with a project, it would be Mary Fortman. She works with Open Lands. And I can leave this up, and then I'm happy to answer your questions, and I have my information here. You can email me directly about my presentation, pictures and things like that. But if you wanted to have somebody come out and walk your yard, our Lake County affiliate is Open Lands. So if you have questions that have popped up, I see a few things in the chat. I can address them now.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. That's a good presentation for awareness and a diverse, different type of style that some people are used to. And a lot of us are used to forest preserves and that type of restoration. So let's see. Anybody have, have you, I noticed Kathy Garnis is asking about, in general, about the managing of teasel. Jim, have you ever come across any of that with IDOT, or have they ever asked you to do any, information about? We do have a lot of teasel in Lake County. It doesn't seem to be taken care of by IDOT, but has there been anything where you have kind of suggested to them in the other counties?
Yeah, and not just IDOT. I've got a site, a BP Amico site, and they were given a native landscaping award, and they have a big sign saying this landscape is been awarded a habitat award, and there's teasel all over it now. So they have not maintained it, and it's a problem. So even if you get it established, understanding that the maintenance drops, I said 50% cost lower than what mowing would be, but in many cases they just stopped maintaining altogether, and that doesn't work. So they're aware of it, but it doesn't seem to be a priority. So we remind them whenever we see them, but I think it's kind of our responsibility on all the sites for all of us to be the squeaky wheel in our community. Mm-hmm. Some of the homeowners associations, I tell the people that, there's no reason you can't come out. And we have some work days where people come out and cut the teasel seed heads and bag them, and we get them out of there so that at least they're not reproducing. There's always an issue of herbicide spray is the best way to go after teasel. Our position on herbicide is that if used properly, it can be a usable weapon. I don't think it's something we don't take the harsh thing of no chemical ever, because in reality on larger sites it's the best way, and it can be as simple as vinegar in some of the cases. So it doesn't have to be the dreaded Roundup, but addressing these invasive species is a huge problem that I deal with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So somebody asked about maybe it would apply to what you put in, because a lot of them are first year pictures, about how much maintenance at a house for weeding. Let's say, have you noticed a lot less being done in those areas because of the way you've landscaped? I mean, you mentioned that originally, maybe because of the tightness of the grasses and the meadow and the prairies, but you have some open areas.
I'm working with Habitat for Humanity and a variety of different things, and the story the reality of it is the plants are the same cost. So if you buy a 1 gallon hosta or you buy a 1 gallon drop seed, the cost is the same. And if you put 3 hosta in or 3 drop seed, the amount of maintenance is about the same. You're weeding around these new plants. So some of the projects, they're small enough. We have people put down a couple layers of newspaper and then mulch over them. I think that's what they did in that one house project. So the newspaper will degrade and keep the weeds down for a year or two while these plants establish and fill in. And the other secret is we're telling people to plant a cluster of things, especially if you want it to look more organized. You don't just plant one of these and one of those, you plant a grouping, and it's much easier to weed when you know that these 5 plants are the same. Then anything that's not those can be taken out of that area. And it's the same kind of weed. I mean, typically, the thistle, the dandelion, the plantain, the same stuff you're going to see in your garden and your other flower beds are going to be the same ones that are going to pop up in your native area.
Mhm, mhm. And I notice you have different plants, and I'm sure you try to plant for different periods of time for a different, like spring, summer, and fall for blooming of plants, and a wide variety, and for birds also.
And people give me emphasis on what they would like to have happen. Some of them they're wanting low profile so they can see out over the lake, or other parameters that help me decide what would be the best plant for it.
So,
And I think the other thing is, since some of the people, like not everybody is at the high level of understanding that most of your members are, but all of the groups that I work with, we're trying to bring in new members, young members. And how do you attract those people who just bought a young couple bought a house down the street? They don't have a clue. And so I try to start with easy things that are foolproof, that bloom a long time, that are really going to be successful. There's more likelihood that they're going to continue when they have success.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. It's interesting to note that, I mean, I have a son that lives out in Portland, and he's lived in Eugene. And your picture of of plantings in a yard that go right up to maybe the road or the sidewalk is very typical out there. And a lot of them are edible. A lot of them they share. People are welcome to come by and pick or cut some herbs, and it does create quite a healthy climate around there for that. But and Chicago itself is considered a sister city of Portland. And one of the reasons was because of Chicago and the Chicago area of putting rooftop gardens in. So have you worked with any rooftop projects?
Yeah, a few green roofs. We have one at the farm. They're still not, I mean, we don't have the climate that they have in Portland. And I had this conversation with my daughter. I visited her. She's living in Spain, in Barcelona. And they have these beautiful orange trees that grow along the road. And she thought it was wonderful. Like, look at all these oranges that are just growing, and anybody could just pluck them off the tree. Well, it wasn't a month or two that she realized that those are basically inedible, because they spray the living daylights out of the trees with herbicide or pesticide. They come down the street with like a fire truck, and they hose down the buildings, sidewalks, trees, everything gets sprayed with pesticide. And so they have to warn the homeless people and other people, like, yeah, that orange looks really attractive there, but don't eat it. Yeah. It's not, the problems we have are not just here, they're all over. So it's nice to hear that at least Portland's got some good things going. You hear all the bad stuff about rioting and all these other human issues there. So
Yeah, well, that's what they said about Chicago too. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But so if you are advocating obviously for this, is there something that a homeowner should do informing a city? You're talking about spraying and things, informing your town or your, you know, a city that you have done this and you'd appreciate the lack of some of the sprays that come around. I know people are upset with some of the mosquito sprays that are things.
Yeah, actually, you know, everybody, I did a presentation at Greentown out in Rockford a couple of weeks back, and that came up to saying like, well, what can I do in my area? And it comes down to get involved. Yeah, I mean, there are individual issues. One of the guys there, he was complaining that the park on his side of this town was not well cared for, and that a lot of his neighbors and stuff used this park. And why doesn't the park district clean it up? And you know, I'm the one who was always advocating. A lot of times the government is not going to take care of it. So, you know, get your neighbors together and have a little pickup garbage party, and, you know, encouraging people to get involved, go to their city council meeting, go to their homeowners association meeting, put in their 2 cents and say, I'd like things to be more ecologically sound.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect watching over in certain of these areas have a lot of landscapers, watching over the landscaper you hire to see what he's doing or that might be adverse to what you're trying to accomplish.
And there are landscapers that really know their natives. We work with Red Stem. They're a big one that's working along the North Shore there, Evanston and some areas there. And some that don't have a clue. So we're trying to educate them too. I work with the ILCA, the Illinois Landscape Contractors Association, trying to get more landscapers to understand that this is a growing market, and having people on your staff that can reach these new audience of people that want to do things a little bit greener.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm looking to see if there's any other questions in the chat. Best role for county government to promote native planting in residential and commercial properties. What's the best role, it says? Well, that I suspect would make sure the people running the county government are on board in the first place. I would think, and but
we go to the county, to almost every municipality in our area, and we say, you know, does this you want to be environmentally sensitive, or are you not interested? And if they want to do something, we're here to help you. And you know, the ones that don't, I get people saying, like in my area, Wheaton, the city council in Wheaton just doesn't seem to want to do things in the right way. So I don't spend a lot of time there. I'm in Glen Ellen, I'm in Downers Grove, or some other communities where I'm embraced and the people are looking to go in that direction. So, you know, what are the platforms that people are when you're voting? And the mayor, what are they pushing in the community that you're in? A lot of the areas are known for, you know, the trees. You know, Lake County is the water and the trees. That's why people move to Lake County, to get the beauty. And so are you preserving it? Are you increasing the oak coverage, diversity of the tree species and different things, protecting the water resources so it doesn't get to be like Cook County?
Mm-hmm. Somebody had a question. If you've, it says they've been reducing the lawn area. Is clover a good option for the remaining lawn?
Yes. You don't have to go 100% clover. I've had some personal, I grew a patch of solid clover and it was great because it fixes nitrogen and so on. But found out that things like crabgrass just love that high nitrogen, and it caused other issues. But mixing clover into a yard is a wonderful thing to have. Now, that being said, you can't spray the herbicide. So if you have a ChemLawn or one of those services, it's not compatible with clover. So just like dandelions, clover is a broadleaf and it would get wiped out by the spray. So you have to be careful if you're going to put clover in, which will support bees. But the spraying has to be reduced.
Mhm. Now you work on big areas that probably could do this, but somebody had a question about maintenance and burning, that's done in forest preserves frequently, but for a private property.
A lot of the contractors will burn for like homeowners associations and things like that. You can burn in every county in Illinois. So it's not a matter of you can't. You have to get the proper permits. And there are licensed bonded contractors that can do it for you. So we're burning along pond edges and things like that with contractors. And one of the homeowners associations I went to, they said, we're not going to burn, so don't even talk about burning. And I said, okay. And then they said, well, I have a question, why are you promoting burning? And I said, because it's cheap. And they're like, well, talk to us about burning. So it's acre for acre, square foot for square foot. It's less expensive maintenance to be able to burn. So we try to tell people, if you're planning something, plan to be able to burn it. So lake edge is pretty easy because it's not going to burn in the water, and on the other side it's typically grass. So you just have to make sure that you're not burning around like pine trees and things like that. But plan for a burn. That's what I would tell people as you're putting in larger areas.
There's a couple of comments directly to you that were positive that you might want to look at on there. And it says, can you explain the responsibility of developers to maintain BMPs with natives to prevent MS4 runoff?
Unfortunately, a lot of the municipalities have not put the requirements long-term for maintenance. So we've started a program, and some of the other land trusts have programs that they put in place as these developments are put in that provide continued funding. So it's always a matter of, we don't have any money, and they haven't planned. They have enough money to plow the streets and to do certain things that they want to do. To mow the lawn, they have plenty of money for that, but they don't find the money for the maintenance of these natural areas. So one of the homeowners associations I went to, the people that lived on the pond in the back, the pond was just overgrown. So I went and looked at the pond. It was terrible looking, teasel and all the unified array of invasive species, and the people back there were complaining. So I went to the board and I looked at their bylaws, and I said, in the first line of your bylaws is, we maintain the 43 acres. And I said, the 7 acres in the back by the pond, you don't maintain. So you've, right in the first sentence of your bylaws, you're not fulfilling the bylaws because you are not maintaining that. And the people back there don't like it. And they have a right, to understand why you mow the front and you put in all these different flowers right by the front, but then the back gets nothing done to it. So I think it's the same kind of thing where we have to be diligent about being the squeaky wheel that says, why aren't we doing this? Why, why does this look like this?
Mhm.
I didn't show the picture, but that's how I got started with the conservation group. Is I used to fish down by the river, and when I went back there as an adult, it was just loaded with garbage. And I called the mayor and I said, this is appalling. Why do you let this happen? And the answer was, well, we don't have any money and it doesn't really bother me and I don't really care about it. But if it bothers you, why don't you do it? And so I started doing a river cleanup, and that led to one thing and another thing. And the paper came out, and all of a sudden, here I am years later, with the job doing what I started doing because I was an activist.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you bring up some other issues that, I'm sure almost everybody is familiar with this, but every year citizen scientists do river watch, and there's quite a few sites in Lake County, even up here. And you can look at all that data by going to the site for River Watch for Illinois, which is the offices downstate, and see what was found for that year and see if it is getting cleaner, if there's more of this runoff, or then you can be an advocate for working on upriver, upstream, whatever, to help control that. But well, I thank you very much. And I think you've started to warm up just being on here. It's warming up outside, and we're going to have a warm weekend again. So, and it's thanks to you showing all these flowers, I guess, and plants. And
I hope I've motivated some people to bring some more members to your organization to get out there and do things and be part of the answer rather than part of the problem.
yes. So if you would like to watch this again in a while, it will be on Lake County Audubon Society, Illinois, Zoom, where you will be able to watch it again or tell other people that would like to enjoy it, where it would be. So it'll take a little while, but it will be on there. And I said Zoom, I meant YouTube. I'm sorry, Lake County Audubon Society, Illinois, YouTube. Our Zoom ones do not save for more than 3 or 4 weeks. So we've gone to YouTube, and they're supposedly on there forever. So you'll be able to watch that. And if there's no other, let's see. Yep. So there's no other questions. A big thank you to you. And again, we hope to hear from you again. And
Anytime. You know where to find me.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this will end this meeting, and we will look forward to seeing you in January. Everybody try to stay healthy and productive. And we hope that you would be able to, with all these COVID and new COVID actions coming up, have a good holidays. And thank you from Lake County Audubon for all the things a lot of you do to help and volunteer.